massive protests in France against a new COVID-19 health pass. Wildfires still burn out of control in Greece as thousands flee. And Taliban groups captured the Siberian city in the southwest of Afghanistan. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets across France on Saturday for the fourth weekend in a row to rally against a new health pass. From Monday, the health pass will be needed to eat in a restaurant or enjoy a drink in a cafe, both indoors and on a terrace. It will be obligatory in inter-city transport, including high-speed trains and domestic flights, although will not be needed on metro systems and suburban transports. The new rules, endorsed by President Emmanuel Macron, make it obligatory to have either a full course of vaccination against COVID-19, be in possession of a negative test, or be recently recovered from the virus to enjoy common day activities.
I am a father and I want to keep the freedom to protect my child from this vaccine. The virus has not reached him and he's not part of the age group for which this kind of virus is to be feared. And therefore, we want to keep this freedom to protect our children. And I am also here for that.
The raging wildfires in Greece have killed a volunteer firefighter in a blaze threatening Athens' most important national park. Over 1,000 people have been evacuated by ferries from a seaside village and beaches on the island of Evia, popular with holidaymakers and campers, after flames from a massive wildfire burning for days cut off all other means of escape. For the third consecutive day, Greece's firefighting forces have been stretched to the limit. The government has appealed for help through the European Union's emergency support system, and firefighters and aircraft have arrived from France, Ukraine, Cyprus, Croatia, Sweden, and Israel.
The situation today is a little better than yesterday. We must continue with great intensity the effort to limit all fires and not to have any risk of reignition.
Meanwhile, wildfires in Russia's Siberia region has endangered several villages and prompted authorities to evacuate residents of some areas. Officials have reported that in northeastern Siberia, 93 active forest fires burned across 1.1 million hectares of Sukhaya-Yukatia, making it the worst affected region of Russia. The Defense Ministry has deployed 120 military engineers to fight the fire in the region. In recent years, Russia has recorded high temperatures that many scientists regard as a result of climate change. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Austria is one of the country's key trading partners in the European region. Putin made his remarks during the inauguration of a major Austrian construction materials manufacturing company in the Republic of Bashkortostan. He said that about 1,500 companies of Austrian origin are successfully operating in the country with an investment estimated at $6 billion. The Russian president referred to the recent commodity-driven inflation rates observed in the United States and Europe, which he said represent a threat to the stability of the global economy. China's executive power has rejected the United States' interference into Hong Kong and Taiwan regions. President Xi Jinping criticized Joe Biden's announcement that he will grant asylum to Hong Kong nationals temporarily in the United States, while affirming that they are afraid to return, alleging a suspected repression by China after the approval of the national security law for Hong Kong. Xi Jinping recalled that the law is aimed at a group of people who are trying to endanger stability in Hong Kong and who have repeatedly called for foreign interventions. He also denounced that the use of human rights issues by the United States and the UK to interfere in the internal affairs of China, and said that he will take the necessary measures to defend the sovereignty and the integrity of his country. The United Kingdom has surpassed 6 million COVID-19 infections since the pandemic began, with almost 32,000 new infections reported in the last 24 hours. Health authorities also reported that at least 92 people died in the last hours, taking the number of deaths due to the virus to the more than 131,000. Still, experts said current figures could indicate that the pandemic is beginning to descend in the country. For government advisors, the apparent reduction of the new wave of COVID-19 is a result of the success of the vaccination campaign. The World Health Organization called on nations to include people with HIV as a priority group for a COVID vaccination. The WHO coordinator for HIV prevention and care department, hepatitis and sexually transmitted disease, Meg Doherty, stated that people living with the virus should be included in the priority groups for coronavirus vaccination. According to WHO authorities, hospitalization of people with HIV who had been infected with COVID-19 have increased by 30%. Therefore, people with HIV should be a priority in the vaccination. In the United States, Louisiana's chief public health officer has announced that about 1% of the state's entire population has become infected with COVID-19 over the past 2 weeks. For the fourth day, Louisiana set new coronavirus hospitalization records. The State Department of Health reported 2,421 people were in hospitals around the state with COVID-19, with more than 8 times the number hospitalized at the beginning of July. Louisiana has confirmed thousands of new coronavirus cases each day, driven by the highly contagious Delta variant. According to data from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Louisiana is average 653 COVID-19 infections for every 100,000 residents.
From Children's Hospital in New Orleans, the Delta variant is affecting children at a greater rate than during the
for the amount of COVID that circulates in our communities. The bottom line up front here is that there's no real good news in here. We continue to set new records for the amount of COVID that circulates in our communities, and we continue to not yet see any tangible signs that we are turning a corner, and that, quite frankly, is terrifying.
We have more children sick with COVID-19 than at any other time during the pandemic. And as we heard from hospital leaders on Monday, particularly Dr. Klein, the pediatrician from Children's Hospital in New Orleans, the Delta variant is affecting children at a greater rate than during the surges that we saw previously.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Federation of University Students of Ecuador has announced that it will join a national demonstration to demand Guillermo Lazo's government to establish a fuel price control system. On Twitter, the Federation announced it's going to participate in the mobilization planned for next August 11th, along with several social organizations. They will demand the elimination of decrees which allow the arbitrary increase of fuel prices at the national level. The increase in fuel prices results from a fluctuation ban system established by the previous administration of Lenín Moreno, and the new president, Guillermo Lazo, has decided to maintain it despite the social discontent. Bolivian President Luis Arce has sent a message calling for unity during the honor session of the Legislative Assembly to celebrate 160 years of the Bolivian independence. This event found Bolivia in a different position from the previous de facto government administration, when the economic and health situation was critical, in addition to being plagued by acts of corruption. The country is currently facing the COVID-19 pandemic and working towards economic reactivation. President Arce recalled the achievements of former President Evo Morales during his presidential term.
Evo Morales' leadership, we started our democratic and cultural revolution. We nationalized our strategic natural resources. We made economic excess previously exported stay in Bolivia. We redistributed the wealth with our productive social economic model.
President Arce also talked about the social and economic progress during his administration.
On the other hand, through the state budget approved in this assembly, we determined to restore public investment to his leading role as the engine of the Bolivian economy. And today, our national government is investing $4 billion.
Panamanian and Colombian officials have agreed to restrict the growing flow of migrants, mainly Cubans and Haitians, from crossing the Darien Gap that marks the border between the two countries. The foreign ministers of both nations say that they will announce a target number for migrants limit next week. The figure will be determined at the meeting in Colombia due to take place on Monday between both countries' security and immigration officials. Local officials estimated more than 10,000 migrants have massed recently in Necoclí, a Colombian city that has become a bottleneck on the global migrant trail that winds through South and Central America and onto Mexico and the U.S. southern border.
In my experience, what I can tell people is not to do it. I did it, but those who haven't done it thinks it's something else. And make people tell you that so you don't do it. I advise people not to come. Don't go through there. It is the most terrible thing in the world.
In Brazil, the head of the Senate and National Electoral Congress, Rodrigo Pacheco, said that President Jair Bolsonaro's proposal to change from electronic to paper voting for the next presidential elections will not proceed. Pacheco claimed the proposal to modify the constitution and introduce the printed vote promoted by Bolsonaro's allies have already been voted down by a wide margin in a special commission. In recent weeks, President Bolsonaro has stated that if the current system of electronic ballot boxes is not changed for the printed vote, he will not accept the electoral results. The head of the Brazilian Senate said that anyone who advocates for democratic setbacks or calls for suspending the elections in 2022 will be branded by the people and the history as an enemy of the nation. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has reiterated his request for the resignation of the Electoral Court's judges as a first step towards the reorganization of the institution. López Obrador highlighted the importance of generating a reform to the country's electoral institutions. However, the head of the state said that he will not mediate in the conflict in the Electoral Tribunal because it is an autonomous institution. He recalled that the problem must be solved by judges themselves. St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves has traveled to Barbados to receive special medical attention after being hurt by a protester on Thursday. On his Twitter account, the Treasury Minister Camilo Gonsalves said that PM will undergo different medical tests to have a better diagnosis. On Thursday night, law enforcement arrested a woman suspected of assault and attempted assassination. The Prime Minister was injured in the head after being hit with a stone at an entrance of Parliament building while several people were protesting against new anti-COVID-19 measures. Government Senator Julian Francis said the investigations will continue. The Haitian Foreign Ministry requested assistance from the United Nations to carry out an investigation into the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. The request was submitted to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship, Claude Joseph. The Haitian Foreign Ministry considers that the assassination of the president and the attack that injured the First Lady, Martine Moïse, is qualified as an international crime because of the alleged participation of foreign individuals in the planning, financing, and execution of the act. So far, the Haitian National Police arrested dozens of people, including 18 Colombian mercenaries and several Haitian nationals. Peru's President Pedro Castillo has received the first dose of China's Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine on the opening day of the fourth vaccination program that started in capital Lima. Castillo's vaccination coincided with the beginning of the mass application of the Sinopharm vaccine to the general population. The president assured that his government will give an absolute priority to the vaccination programs. Currently, the vaccine is open for application in Lima. People aged 28 to 34 are eligible to receive the first dose, while people above 35 are able to receive the second one. Currently, 5.7 million people have been vaccinated with the full two-dose course, or some 17% of the nation's population. About 2.5 million people have received only the first dose so far.
It is time to guarantee health. I came to be vaccinated with this vaccine, the Sinopharm, because I have faith not only in this vaccine, but also in all vaccines. But it is necessary to make a call. I call upon all the brothers, all the Peruvians, so that we prioritize this right to health, the right to life.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Taliban groups have captured their first provincial capital in a blow to the Afghan government, which loses ground in the fight against the rebels. The city of Saranj is the latest acquisition of the armed opposition that launched a major offensive along with the departure of United States troops from the country. The city was claimed to have been taken without a fight by the deputy mayor, who confirmed that the fall of Saranj in Taliban hands. Afghan ambassador to the United Nations, Ghulam Iskasi, condemned violence after the UN Security Council meeting that addressed the country's highly intensified and increased conflict between the government and the opposition organization.
Informed the Council about grave human rights violations in Afghanistan happening. We see the Taliban in area they're capturing, their summary killings, executions, as well as chopping of hands, stoning to death, and very egregious, the graphic of which would be very difficult to even show here to the media. These are violations of international human rights law, international humanitarian laws, and some of these will amount to war crime. So we expect the Council to step in and take immediate action.
The United Nations envoy to Afghanistan, Deborah Lyons, warns the country is heading toward catastrophe as she calls on the Taliban to cease fire on major cities immediately.
We have an opportunity to demonstrate the commitment of the UN Security Council and the regional and international community that you represent to prevent Afghanistan from descending into a situation of catastrophe so serious that it would have few, if any, parallels in this century. To attack urban areas is to knowingly inflict enormous harm and cause massive civilian casualties. Nonetheless, the threatening of large urban areas appears to be a strategic decision by the Taliban, who have accepted the likely carnage that will ensue. Afghanistan National Security and Defense Forces are defending these cities. But this defense will also undoubtedly cause civilian casualties.
The UN Security Council has called for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon amid rising tensions in the common border. The UN peacekeeping mission's head in Lebanon, Stefano Del Col, urged the Lebanese and Israeli armed forces to use the coordination mechanisms between the three parties to avoid an escalation of violence. Del Col chaired a meeting with officers from both sides and urged them to find ways to strengthen border security. Several people have been injured during the attack. Local authorities have asked residents of northern Galilee to stay inside their bomb shelters until further notice.
Concerned about the escalatory developments, including rocket fire into Israel and airstrikes and artillery fire in response across the blue line in recent days. We call on all parties to exercise utmost restraint and maintain stability. Lebanon cannot afford another crisis. It is paramount that all actors involved avoid actions that could further heighten tensions and lead to miscalculation. UNIFIL's head of mission and force commander, Major General Stefano Del Col, is in direct contact with the parties. He calls on everyone to immediately cease fire. This is a very dangerous situation with escalatory actions seen on both sides over the past 2 days.
Israel has conducted an overnight airstrike in Gaza that damaged olive trees. The olive trees function on a socio-economic level. It is a source of income for farmers and provides security for further generations to ensure that they will have consistent income as well. Olive trees carry more than an economic significance in the lives of Palestinians. They are not only just like any other trees. They are symbolic of Palestinians' attachment to their land because of the trees are drought resistant and grow under poor soil conditions. They represent Palestinian resistance and resilience.
My children and I were sleeping in the house, and suddenly we heard the pounding and the rockets. And we came here running and found the leaves destroyed and the land also. We did nothing against them, and the situation is calm since the last war. Even the resistance did not do anything towards them.
And in other news, Cuba remains a world sports power with a memorable performance at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Despite traveling to Tokyo Olympic Games with its third smallest sports delegation in the last 60 years, Cuba has already improved its results achieved 4 years ago in Rio 2016. Cuban athletes have won 13 medals, including 6 gold, 3 silver, and 4 bronze medals, with boxing as the sport in which athletes have obtained the best performance. Mijail Lopez is among Cuba's medal winners, who won his 4th consecutive gold medal in Greco-Roman wrestling at the Olympic Games.